This appointment was set months ago, and you are late again. I cannot believe this. How dare you just stand there drinking coffee?
The HOA president actually wrapped a heavy gauge chain around my driveway gate at exactly 6:47 on a Tuesday morning and secured it with a padlock the size of my fist. She left a laminated notice zip-tied to the metal that read, Emergency Vehicle Access Enforcement. HOA Code 9.3. I didn't cut the chain. I didn't call a locksmith. I walked back into my house, opened the fireproof safe in my study, and pulled out a folded piece of paper that had been sitting there since 1987. It was the original 1948 property deed to my home, signed in fountain pen ink that had faded to sepia. 72 hours later, I was sitting on my front porch with a glass of iced tea, watching a city surveyor drive stakes into Karen's front lawn while she stood barefoot on her driveway, holding her phone like it could reverse what she'd just learned. But before I tell you how a 76-year-old piece of paper unraveled 6 years of her unchecked authority, you need to understand how we got here. My name is Richard. I'm 58 years old, and I spent 32 years as a title examiner for a regional insurance company before I retired. My job was reading property records, identifying boundary disputes, and recognizing when someone's claim to land didn't match what the county had on file. I know the difference between a warranty deed and a quitclaim. I know what a meets and bounds description looks like when it was written before GPS existed. And I know that most people, including HOA presidents, have absolutely no idea where their property actually ends. I live in a neighborhood that was carved out of farmland in the late 1940s, back when developers used physical landmarks, oak trees, creek beds, stone markers, to establish boundaries. My house sits on a corner lot. The driveway runs along the side, and there's a wrought iron gate I installed in 1998 that opens onto the street. Every morning, I walk out to that gate with my first cup of coffee. The air smells like cut grass and motor oil from my garage, and there's a particular quiet that comes right before the rest of the world wakes up. That's my favorite part of the day. Or it was, until Karen decided my gate was a community problem. Karen became HOA president 4 years ago. She's 52, drives a champagne-colored Cadillac XT5, and she carries a leather-bound planner embossed with her initials in gold. It's not a normal planner. It's her book of laws. Inside are printed copies of the HOA covenants, handwritten amendments she's proposed, and page after page of photographs documenting violations throughout the neighborhood. She once showed it to me during a board meeting, flipping through plastic sleeves like a prosecutor presenting evidence. The planner goes everywhere with her. She holds it against her chest when she walks like a shield, and she uses it to point at things, mailboxes, fences, garbage bins, that don't meet her personal interpretation of community standards. The first time I encountered her power trip was minor. It was a Thursday afternoon in June, about 3 years ago. I parked my truck in my own driveway, angled slightly, so I could unload landscaping stone from the bed. She appeared at the end of my driveway, planner open, staring at my truck like it was an oil spill. "Richard," she said, her voice bright and sharp, "your vehicle is protruding into the sightline easement." I looked at my truck. The back tire was 2 inches over the edge of my driveway onto the grass. I was unloading stone. "I'll move it in 10 minutes, Karen," I said. She smiled tightly. "The covenant specifies immediate compliance. I'll make a note that you were cooperative." She took a photo with her phone and walked away. That was the beginning. A month later, she left a written notice on my door claiming my gate. My wrought iron gate that had been there for over 20 years was a non-conforming obstruction because it opened outward toward the street instead of inward. According to her planner, all gates must swing into the property. I checked the covenants. There was no such rule. I told her that at the next board meeting. She said the rule was implied under aesthetic consistency standards. 2 months after that, she declared that my driveway, which runs parallel to the street, was being used as a secondary access route by delivery drivers and that I needed to install bollards to prevent unauthorized ingress. I'm not sure what unauthorized ingress means when it's my own driveway, but I smiled, nodded, and ignored her. The incidents kept coming. She complained about the color of my garage door. She said my mailbox post was 1 inch too far from the curb. She told me my trash bins were visible from the street on non-collection days, even though they were behind my fence. Each time, I stayed calm. I corrected what was reasonable. I ignored what wasn't. But Karen doesn't take well to being ignored. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in early October. I woke up at 6:30, made coffee, and walked outside in my robe and slippers to grab the newspaper. My driveway gate, the one I'd opened and closed 1,000 times, wouldn't move. I stepped closer. There was a chain, thick, galvanized steel, wrapped through the bars and locked with a padlock. Zip-tied to the chain was a laminated card, printed in Arial font that read, Emergency Vehicle Access Enforcement. Per HOA Code 9.3, gates obstructing potential emergency vehicle routing must remain in the open position at all times. Noncompliance will result in fines up to $500 per day. This gate will remain secured until compliance is verified. HOA Board President. I stood there, coffee in hand, staring at the chain. My gate didn't block emergency vehicles. It opened onto a residential street with plenty of clearance. There was no HOA Code 9.3. Karen had invented it, printed it, laminated it, and locked my gate shut while I was asleep. I looked across the street. My neighbor, Bill, was sitting on his front porch. Bill is 74, a retired postal carrier who's lived here since 1981. He doesn't say much. He drinks black coffee every morning and watches the neighborhood like it's a slow-moving documentary. Our eyes met. He raised his mug slightly, shook his head once, and took a sip. That was all I needed. If you've ever had a neighbor who thinks the HOA rulebook is her personal weapon, you'll want to stay tuned. Hit subscribe if you'd rather solve problems with paperwork than shouting, because that's exactly what I did. I didn't knock on Karen's door. I didn't call the police. I walked back into my house, went to my study, and opened the safe. Inside was the original deed to my property, transferred to me in 1987 when I bought the house. But underneath that deed was another one, the original 1948 deed issued when this land was first subdivided. I'd requested a certified copy from the county recorder's office years ago out of professional habit. Title examiners do that. We like knowing the history. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was brittle, yellowed at the edges, but the language was clear. The property description used meets and bounds, referencing a stone marker at the southwest corner, an iron pin 30 feet north of the creek bed, and a boundary line that ran along the eastern edge of the farm access road. I cross-referenced it with the current survey I'd had done in 1998. Then I pulled up the county's GIS mapping system on my laptop. I spent 2 hours that morning overlaying old descriptions with modern parcel lines. What I found was exactly what I suspected. When this neighborhood was subdivided in 1948, the original developer used the old farm road as the western boundary for the first row of lots. That road became the current street. But the survey wasn't precise by modern standards. The actual boundary, according to the 1948 deed and the iron pins that were still in the ground, ran approximately 6 feet farther west than where the modern property lines were assumed to be. That 6-foot strip included the area where Karen's front lawn, her decorative lamppost, and about half of her driveway currently sat. Technically, according to the original legally recorded deed, Karen's front yard was on my property. I made 3 calls. First, to a licensed surveyor I'd worked with during my title examination days. I asked him to come out, locate the original iron pins, and provide a certified boundary survey based on the 1948 meets and bounds description. He said he'd be there Thursday morning. Second, I called the county recorder's office and requested certified copies of every deed in the chain of title for both my property and Karen's, going back to 1948. They said it would take 5 business days. Third, I called my attorney, a man named Donald who specializes in real estate disputes. I explained the situation. He listened quietly and then said, "Richard, if what you're telling me is accurate, you need to do nothing until the survey is complete. Don't cut the chain. Let her think she won." I didn't cut the chain. I parked on the street and walked into my house through the front door. For 3 days, that chain stayed on my gate. Karen drove past twice, slowing down to look at it, clearly pleased with herself, Thursday morning, the surveyor arrived at 7:15. His name was Ed. He wore a reflective vest and carried a tripod, a GPS receiver, and a metal detector. Bill was already on his porch with his coffee, watching. Ed started at the southwest corner of my lot, near the old creek bed. He found the original iron pin buried 4 inches underground, covered in decades of soil. He marked it with a flag. Then he moved north, following the 1948 description, and found the second pin along the side boundary. Finally, he ran his measurements along the front of the property, following the meets and bounds line that described the eastern edge of the farm access road. He placed a wooden survey stake exactly where the original boundary was. That stake was in Karen's front lawn, 6 feet west of where her modern property was supposed to begin. Ed took photos, measurements, and GPS coordinates. By 9:30, he was done. He handed me a USB drive with the data and said he'd have the certified survey report to me by Monday. I thanked him. Bill watched the whole thing from his porch, sipping his coffee. At this point, Karen had no idea what I'd done, but she was about to find out in the most public way possible. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button, because the next part is better than any tow truck. Monday afternoon, the certified survey arrived via email. It was 12 pages long, with maps, coordinates, photographs of the original iron pins, and a notarized statement from Ed confirming that the 1948 boundary description placed my property line 6 feet west of the currently assumed line. I forwarded the survey to Donald, my attorney. He reviewed it and called me back within an hour. "This is solid, Richard," he said. "You want to pursue a boundary dispute?" I thought about it. I didn't need 6 extra feet of lawn, but I needed Karen to understand that her authority had limits. "I want her to know the truth," I said. "Let's send a letter." Donald drafted a formal letter, attached the survey, and mailed it certified to Karen's address. The letter was polite but clear. It stated that recent survey work had revealed a discrepancy in the property boundary, that the original 1948 deed superseded modern assumptions, and that a portion of her front yard, including her decorative lamppost and driveway, appeared to encroach on my legal property. It requested that she acknowledge the findings and work cooperatively to resolve the encroachment. It did not threaten. It simply informed. She received the letter on Wednesday. Thursday morning, I was in my garage organizing tools when I heard heels clicking rapidly on pavement. I looked up. Karen was speed-walking down my driveway, letter in hand, her leather planner tucked under her arm. Her face was red. She stopped at the open garage door. "This is insane," she said, waving the letter. "You hired some surveyor to fabricate a boundary dispute because I enforced a safety code?" I wiped my hands on a rag and walked calmly toward her. "I didn't fabricate anything, Karen. The 1948 deed is recorded with the county. The surveyor found the original iron pins. They're still in the ground." "This doesn't mean anything," she said. "Modern surveys override old farm descriptions." "Actually," I said, "legally recorded deeds take precedence unless they've been formally vacated or superseded. You can check with your attorney if you'd like." Her jaw tightened. "You're doing this because of the gate." "I'm doing this because you chained my gate shut and invented a rule that doesn't exist. But that's separate. This is about property boundaries." She stared at me. Then she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the city," she said. "Good," I replied. "Ask for the zoning and survey department." "'Kay." She called. She stood in my driveway, on speaker, and demanded that someone from the city come out and resolve a fraudulent survey claim. The woman on the phone said she'd send an inspector out Friday afternoon. Karen hung up, glared at me, and walked back to her house without another word. Bill was on his porch. He didn't say anything. He just gave me a slow nod. Friday at 2 o'clock, a white city truck pulled up. A man in a polo shirt with a clipboard stepped out. His name was Mr. Alvarez. He was the city's zoning and land survey coordinator. Karen was already outside, planner in hand, heels on, makeup perfect. "I walked over calmly." Mr. Alvarez shook both our hands. "Let's take a look," he said. I handed him a copy of the certified survey, the 1948 deed, and the chain of title documents. He spent 10 minutes reading them on the hood of his truck. Then he walked to the front of Karen's property and looked at the survey stake Ed had placed. He pulled a tape measure from his belt, measured from the stake to Karen's lamppost. 6 feet, 2 inches. He measured to the edge of her driveway. For feet, 8 inches. He wrote notes on his clipboard. Then he turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have a copy of your property survey?" She blinked. "I have the plat map from when I bought the house." "That's not a legal survey," he said. "This gentleman has a certified meets and bounds survey tied to the original deed. Unless you have a recorded document that supersedes the 1948 boundary, his survey is legally valid." Karen's face went pale. "You're saying my lawn is on his property?" "I'm saying there's a discrepancy that needs to be resolved, likely through a quiet title action or a boundary agreement. But yes, based on these documents, it appears a portion of your front yard encroaches on his legal boundary." Karen opened her planner. Her hands were shaking. The planner slipped. She tried to catch it, stumbled forward in her heels, and the planner hit the pavement. Pages scattered. Photographs of mailboxes and garbage bins slid across the driveway. She crouched down, trying to gather them, but her heel caught the edge of the curb. She didn't fall, but she dropped her phone. The screen cracked. She stood there, holding her cracked phone and a handful of loose pages, staring at the survey stake in her lawn. Bull was on his porch. He looked at her. He looked at me. He raised his coffee mug slightly, turned, and walked inside. Mr. Alvarez handed me back my documents. "You want to work this out privately or through the courts?" he said. "The city doesn't adjudicate boundary disputes, but your survey looks legitimate." He got in his truck and left. Karen didn't speak. She picked up her planner, walked back to her house, and closed the door. That evening, I received an email from the HOA board. Karen had submitted her resignation, effective immediately, citing personal health reasons and time constraints. The email thanked her for her service. 3 weeks later, a surveyor hired by Karen confirmed what Ed had found. The boundary was accurate. She hired an attorney. My attorney and hers negotiated a boundary line agreement that formally adjusted the legal property line to match the modern assumed line, with Karen paying for the survey costs, legal fees, and signing a quitclaim releasing any claim to the disputed strip. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue an encroachment claim. The agreement was recorded with the county in December. The chain on my gate was gone the day after Mr. Alvarez left. I never saw it again. My driveway smells like rain and cut grass now. Every morning, I walk out with my coffee, unlatch my gate, and it swings open smoothly. There's no chain, no laminated notices, no invented rules. Just the quiet that comes when a man knows exactly where his property ends and someone else's problems begin. I didn't need 6 feet of someone else's lawn. I just needed Karen to understand that authority without accuracy is nothing but noise. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a man can do is stay calm, pull out the paperwork, and let the truth do the talking. Boundaries aren't drawn with chains and padlocks. They're drawn with deeds, iron pins, and the patience to know what you own.